Hello everyone, bringing you a video today looking at another part of the British late war jungle kit. Now this is obviously kit designed for the continuing war in the Far East, had Japan not surrendered subsequent to the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs on Japanese territory. So these are essentially a copy or an adaptation of US practice, as were several features of the 1944 pattern web equipment and other parts of the late war jungle equipment. And we're going to have a look at them in some detail now and compare them to the US leggings which inspired the design. So here we have them. Anyone familiar with US M1938 leggings will probably recognise the design straight away. These are clearly based on US practice. Just to say here as well, thank you very much to my friend Alan, who picked these out for me and brought them up with the load of stuff that he brought with him when he came up for Christmas. So they're a relatively new arrival to the collection. And also thank you to Alan for making some of the information available, which is going to be included in the video. These are referred to as Gaiters in British service. Obviously they are based on US leggings, as already mentioned. The design was tested, but was not found to be particularly liked by British troops, not particularly suitable for jungle operations. So these were replaced by a form of ankle puttees, which were made in a green wool cloth. So they don't seem to have seen much service, certainly with British forces, although there are reports of them turning up in batches of kit which were used by other nations' forces. Notably, a friend of mine, Friends of Angul, has a pair of these which were used by the Dutch Marines post-war, and I believe they've turned up in batches of US leggings which have come out of French stores as well. So they were clearly sold off alongside and used alongside US examples by other European armies post-war. The design is very, very similar, as already mentioned. There are some design differences which we'll get into in just a minute comparing these. You can see inside here these are lined. This is to make them more leech-proof. You can see there's a separate lining which runs all the way down. It's just stitched in on each side there and is otherwise loose inside. There aren't particularly clear stamps in this one, unfortunately. A little bit more clear on the other one of the pair here. You can see here size 2 and then the manufacturer's stamp above that with the broad arrow, and then obviously the broad arrows facing each other, showing this has been sold surplus to requirements. These are, we'll contrast them more closely with the US examples. One thing that is a new feature with these is the lining. That's not found on the US design, and this is to make them more leech proof. You can see obviously we have the internal, the riveted in hooks there, the eyelets running up the side there for the lacing, and these lace up in exactly the same sort of way as the US leggings. Slight difference at the bottom here, we'll talk about in a minute. So you put these on, obviously, strap them under the boot, and then pull the lacing tight up the leg, and you have 2 eyelets at the top there, which allows you to fasten the lace around and tie it off at the top there. So, as I say, not a huge step forward from the US design, but there are some detailed differences. We'll bring in an example of the M1938 leggings now to compare directly. So looking at these here, starting at the top, slightly different spacing on the eyelets at the top there, but otherwise these fasten exactly the same way. We've already mentioned the lining here of these, which makes them more leech proof. That is missing off the M1938 leggings. These of course weren't designed specifically for jungle use, so that's understandable that that change was made in the British design. You have a different number of eyelets down the side here and correspondingly a different number of hooks, but otherwise these fasten in the same way down the leg up to a point. At the bottom here you can see that the US leggings, the lacing actually starts on the side with the hooks, so it's tied off there with a little eyelet through there. So the first point where you're pulling these tight around the leg is actually that bottom eyelet there. Pull that tight and it pulls the two together before you start lacing them over the hooks like that. At the bottom of the British ones here you can see it starts on the side with the lacing, and then the first point of tightening these in around the leg is actually the first hook at the bottom there. Slightly simplifies the design, probably makes them a little bit easier to put on as well. Another detail difference is the fact that we slightly longer strap on the US leggings here, as you can see. An advance in the design is the fact that this is easily removable on the British Gaiters, and you can see that here. It simply has a little metal loop on the end, and there's a slot cut and stitched into the lining, and then a metal slot cut into the metal slot fitted into the outer part of the Gaiters here. I believe this is actually the same fitting as used for the quick release tab on the later light anti-gas respirator haversacks, the same fitting there. And you just slot this strap through and pull it tight, and you have a replaceable strap, which makes a lot of sense because this is a part of the Gaiters which is going to wear through most quickly, and you're not going to have to replace that in full every time that wears out. You're not going to have to replace or restitch. I mean, obviously you could stitch a new strap on, but it's a lot easier You can see that's just stitched in place on the US leggings. It's a lot easier to just replace the strap by looping it through, and it's just as effective being removable like that. It does the job in exactly the same way. The buckles here are essentially the same design. If we flip these out so we can actually look at them. Slightly wider on the British Gaiters than on the US leggings, just to accommodate that slightly wider strap, but the function of the buckle with the slider and everything there is exactly the same. Slightly different method of riveting them on there, slightly bigger metal tab on the British example. And of course, as is standard for US web equipment and British web equipment, you do have a difference in the ends which are put on the straps here. The US use a small crimped tip, which is typical for US web equipment. And on the British examples, you have a riveted tip on the end, a little bit more durable. These do have a tendency to pull off more easily than the British examples, which are riveted in place, although easier to put on. Obviously, there's not as much manufacturing in just putting on a little crimp tip like that, but a slight advance in the design again, just a little bit more durable. So that's a comparison of the two. So that was a look at these British Jungle Gaiters. As I say, part of the late war jungle kit, though not used all that much. Still nice to have. They're a part of that equipment, which is obviously an interesting thing in itself, being designed as it was as a full set of equipment for an ongoing campaign, which is, I think, the only time the British Army has ever done that, coming up with a design specifically for a campaign, right the way from clothing to web equipment to small kit, and everything designed specifically for that region, the environmental conditions and the ongoing campaign. It would be nice to put together more of this. I do have quite a lot of the late war jungle kit now, and these are a very nice addition to that equipment. So there we are. I hope you found it interesting looking at these. As I say, late war jungle Gaiters didn't really see much use in British service, or any use in British service as far as I'm aware, perhaps in training prior to troops being sent out to the Far East. But they did see some service with other nations' forces, as we've covered in the video. As I say, I do hope you found it interesting looking at these. If you've found this interesting and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell notification button down below, and that will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch, but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there in the description as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.